Hi there, Agile friends. Get ready for the World Tour of Agile at the Agile Online Summit 2023. You can join us from October 24th to 26th for a global showcase of cutting-edge Agile practices and insights. Join us at agileonlinesummit.com. This year, we will be featuring some of the best work done around the world and world-class keynotes. You can check all of that at agileonlinesummit.com. But the best part is that your ticket is on us. That's right, it's free to attend and immerse yourself in the world of Agile excellence. Don't miss out on this opportunity to level up your skills and network with peers and industry experts. Mark your calendars and secure your spot at AOS 23 today by visiting agileonlinesummit.com. So get your free ticket or opt for the full digital pass that lets you keep all the conference videos forever and organize, why not, Agile learning sessions at work. You can get the full digital access at agileonlinesummit.com. I'll see you in the conference floor. Hello everybody, welcome to a very special bonus episode of the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast. And we have with us, joining us from California in the US, Christopher Lee. Hey Chris, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So Christopher Lee is a seasoned product management coach known for his expertise as a product manager and technology consultant. His insights into the industry are encapsulated in his latest book, which we will talk about in today's episode, The Art of Crafting User Stories. And he's also developed some advanced product management methods that he created when at Ernst & Young. So Chris, that was a short intro. I'll dive into the content of the book, but first I'm interested, what actually drove you to write this book?
It's really good to be on this podcast. I've seen your work. You've had a lot of great authors on and also speakers, so it's an honor to be here. I was actually approached by my technical publisher, Pact Publishing. They reached out to me on LinkedIn, and it seemed like an interesting proposal. I had never written a book previously, and I really love reading books as well as writing. I had written a white paper with the former global CIO of Wiley, my friend Sean Mack, who's also in the book, by the way, and I really enjoyed that whole process. So I wanted to try my hand at writing my very first book.
And I know that writing a book is not easy. I have written my own book, the No Estimates book, as well as helped others write their books, because here at the podcast, we also help authors get their books published. And I know the process isn't easy. And I'm curious, how did you go about researching the topic? I mean, user stories is such a wide topic, right? It goes from anything from product strategy all the way to the day-to-day work. Like, we could use user stories in all of that spectrum. How did you go about researching and then deciding what to include in the book?
Well, when you're putting together a book for any particular publisher, you have to put together a proposal, which includes a content outline, table of contents, and a brief description of what each chapter will entail, along with the sub bullets. Coming up with the basic structure, it's really about, you think about really what your market segment's problems and needs are, and you try to come up with a structure that fits into those needs. One of the things to think about is, what are some of the underserved markets, and what are some of the unique solutions that you can offer that's coming from your strength? So I sort of took an approach of blending as many different points of views and perspectives as possible in the book. For example, I will quote I will pull different aspects of concepts and ideas from things like Google design sprints or user story mapping or things like radical candor or um, uh, many different other books and areas that are up for discussion and debate, such as Jobs to be Done. So I have cited all of these different books and authors in my book.
I really like the way you describe the process of figuring out what to include in the book, because a lot of it is also product management, right? Like at the end of the day, a product is a book that is there to fulfill a need in the market, whether it is to convey information or to provide a different perspective or to collect different methods, whatever that may be, right? When you think about the book that you wrote, The Art of Crafting User Stories, from that perspective, what are some of the tactics, the strategies you've used in your software development life that you then also apply to your book writing process?
One of the things that you can take from software development into book writing is this two key concepts. One is the idea around debugging, and you really need to debug your code and make sure that you're putting out quality code. So how do you do that? There's a number of different ways. One is on my team, I had one content editor and 3 copy editors. Looking back, what I should have done is I should have had a whole series of content reviewers as well. And the more the other publishers will have that usually. They'll pay content reviewers to really go over all of the content and ensure that the quote unquote code quality is there. Another thing you can do, and this is taught in the CS50 course taught by Dave Milan, rubber duck debugging. That is talking. If you're having a writer's block, for instance, or if you're having trouble figuring out what to edit, you can sort of talk through your writer's block or your current writing to a rubber ducky. It sounds stupid, but it really works. If what studies have shown is that when you use a rubber ducky or a colleague as a sounding board, you really start to think through the problems and you start to generate some really good ideas and solutions as you're thinking through the problem and you're talking through it.
Absolutely. And you mentioned 2 key concepts from software development. So if one was debugging, what is the second one that you think can be applied to books?
Probably the rubber duck debugging and just code quality, making sure that you have really, as in my opinion, 6 user tests. So that's the minimum that Nielsen recommend. That's actually the right number that Nielsen Norman Group recommends, 6 usability tests to get really good research and data on how to improve your product. I would recommend the same for your book. I think for my second book, I will definitely be doing that.
Absolutely.
Drinking your own champagne.
Drinking your own champagne. I prefer that to eating your own dog food. Whoever came up with that idea didn't probably have much of a taste. Anyways, coming back to the book, in the book you take quite a different perspective on user stories. You talk about understanding the user perspective, how user stories can help the POs and the team, or how can they, user stories, help the POs and the team kind of jump into the user shoes and understand what the user is trying to achieve or what their goals are instead of just documenting what needs to be developed?
Yeah, I think this is a very important skill for a product manager to have. One of the skills that the executive coach that I've been working with for the last 6 years is uh, developing perspective taking and compassion for others. And that starts with really yourself, number one. Can you identify the emotions in yourself? And if you cannot, um, there, a lot of clinicians or psychologists recommend this really helpful resource called the feelings wheel. And once you're able to identify your own emotions, then you can identify emotions from that of others. And you can sort of validate what you're guessing they're feeling to be and sort of ask them, as well as read their facial expressions. There are different charts online you can validate. So when you're, for example, doing a customer interview or a usability test, part of the nuance that you're picking up on uh, is the emotional field in the room, what they're feeling. And in addition to that, you're also uncovering the needs behind the user needs, or maybe perhaps the jobs to be done. So there's always another layer of user needs that are behind what you think is the actual user need, and that will help you unlock or uncover uh, new ways of of my very first job. There was this book called Blue Ocean, and those are different markets that or products that you can unlock through these types of customer interviews or user research approaches that I'm suggesting that you go ahead and
Blue Ocean, a
take.
great product management book that talks a little bit about how you can bring new products into a market and then create a different perspective on the product itself. Therefore, a blue ocean rather than direct competition, which would be a red ocean. Definitely a great book for product managers out there. Another aspect that is not, in my opinion, discussed often enough is the actual act of writing the user story. So in your book, you advise something that I want to dig a little bit more into. You say avoid ambiguity. And you cover a few aspects, but what do you think our audience needs to be aware of when it comes to writing their user stories in this respect?
I think when I say avoid ambiguity, the best way to do that is to have a conversation with your engineering and design teams, using user stories as the starting point for the conversation and to flesh it out with them in the same virtual or physical room. And once you have started writing your user stories together collaboratively with your team, you can then flesh out the user acceptance testing criteria. And I recommend the Gherkin format, and that helps really reduce the ambiguity that might be had during the sprint if you follow
Can
that.
you just describe quickly the Gherkin format for our audience?
Yeah, so it basically is given, when, then. That's the format that is used for Gherkin, and this format is used to do your behavioral driven development and to have your automated tests. I recommend that every product manager, if at all possible, sit with their QA and see how the automated tests are run, and to also make sure that QA and everyone else is aligned on the acceptance criteria.
And of course, Gherkin is a acceptance test automation framework It helps you write executable tests, which I think is also a key aspect, a key benefit of that conversation format, right? Because when you document the tests that way, you can then easily create the automation backend that will take those Gherkin format specified tests and then transform that into executable tests that can help us validate that we are indeed delivering what we agreed to.
Exactly.
So another topic that comes to user stories, and I'm sure you've heard of this a lot, is the topic of estimation, and of course the related, although not necessarily linked, except by design or except by our own choices, planning. So estimation and planning. And in my opinion, the user story estimation process is fraught with many problems and has downstream consequences that teams need to learn to avoid. Like, for example, making user stories that are non-negotiable, which is the opposite of what the invest mnemonic says in the second letter of the invest mnemonic, where it says explicitly that user stories should be negotiable. How can we avoid this specific trap or problem when we are planning user stories or using user stories to plan our work?
That is a really profound question. I think one of the things that we are all trying to recognize in this day and age is that, ever since the pandemic, a lot, if not all industries have had to learn how to be adaptive and adaptable. And that's sort of the heart of Agile and user stories. And so when we're writing user stories, we have to sort of keep that whole philosophy in mind. And that's what I would say on that.
And when you think about that philosophy in mind, so keeping the idea of being adaptable and adapting as we get feedback, what are some of the things you have discovered through your own practice and your own work that helps us keep user stories as those conversation starters, and of course also as agreements of what needs to be delivered, but at the same time give the team the adaptability and the product owner / product manager the adaptability to take in the feedback as the development evolves?
That's another one question that is really helpful to think about. A couple of things off the top of my head. One is really having the engineers having direct access to the users. So, for example, not necessarily having them talk, like run the user research or usability test, but having them witness that, having them observe the design reviews so that there are no silos. So breaking down those silos, but also having for example, everyone in the room when it comes to having those types of conversations, but also having and what I'm about to say, by the way, is controversial. It's my own opinion. It's not everyone agrees with me, but there's this concept called dual track agile, and you can have both a discovery track and an engineering track running in parallel. And the benefit of doing that is that you get really fast market feedback on your prototypes, and you get real-time customer interviews, and engineering gets benefit from it because they see the why and the value behind why you're proposing certain features going into the backlog. And they also feel much more empowered if they're able to see the problems and come up with the technical solutions based on the behaviors they're literally observing. So that's just my opinion, but I think some would agree with me.
Absolutely. And to emphasize the point that The
Mhm.
fast feedback is how
Yeah.
we keep our flexibility. And
Yes.
this doesn't get emphasized often enough. When we
Yeah.
treat
Lean
user
startup.
stories as non-negotiable, that means we are already by design deciding never to include any feedback, whether it is through testing or
Yeah.
through the development itself, or later
Exactly.
on through customer exposure. And that's actually one of the advantages of even using the concept of user stories in development, which is to keep us open to the feedback we are about to receive. And as the manifesto puts it, responding to change over following a plan also applies to user stories.
Exactly.
Now, another aspect of planning when it comes to the use of user stories is, of course, prioritization. And this is not necessarily an easy aspect of the planning either. And what are some of the tips that you share in the book? I mean, we don't need to go through all of them, but what are some of the tips that you share in the book that help us with this aspect of prioritization of user stories?
I talk about a lot of different methods, including the rice model, Kano model, as well as WSJF, weighted shortest job. First, rice is reach, impact, confidence, and effort. And then what I didn't go into my book, which I would like to cover in this podcast, is prioritization of segments, user and buyer segments. So what I have gathered is that as a product manager, we're very much focused on designing the product for the end user in mind, and as much as possible prioritizing markets that are underserved and where we would really be strong in delivering in, because that's where you'll have the fewest competitors and you'll probably find the most success and the most innovation, but also at the same time not ignoring the buyer segment, because that's what brings home the bacon. So possibly working with product marketing on a go-to-market strategy that appeals to the buyer, but doesn't overpromise on what you're about to deliver. So that's my take on prioritization of the market segments. But I don't go into that in my book. That's just a bonus I'm sharing with you.
Yeah,
I will put that in my revised edition.
Absolutely. And I think it's actually a great insight that often gets missed, right? Like if we go back to the Blue Ocean book that we were just talking a few minutes ago, prioritizing segments or even discussing what segments are we aiming for is an important conversation to have when it comes to strategy for products. And of course, it has direct impact on prioritization. One of the things that I struggle with when working with clients and with teams is this lack of clarity on who are we building this for. We very often talk about end user, and there might even be a persona for the end user, but of course we don't develop products only for end users, right? End users are typically trying to do something that matters for their business, so that may mean that we are actually helping end users do something for someone else. And also very often, especially in the B2B market, the person who buys the product isn't the one using the product, and the buyer also needs to get some value out of it. How do you help the teams you work with to be that clear, that crystal clear on who they are developing the products for?
What you want to do is first, this is the order of operation, and you probably already have all these things, but let's just make sure. First thing you have is your organizational mission statement. That's what flows into everything else. And by the way, this is what I'm saying is not anything new or controversial. This is also what Fang recommends. Then you have your objectives and key results. But even before that, you have your North Star metrics. And your objectives and key results, it depends really on what stage of maturity your company is in, and that will feed and determine what your North Star metrics are. And a combination of your mission, your objectives and your key results, your North Star, and your product strategy, that document is very important, will help you determine which markets, or not market segments, end users that you're supposed to be serving. Technically, that is also part of your product strategy document, what segments you're serving. So the way I like to think about the end users that you should be serving is twofold. Actually, sorry, threefold. One is there an end user segment that your organization is very strong in playing in, and that you'll really knock it out of the park with them. Two is there a end user that is really underserved the market, and there's an opportunity where there's just not too many competitors. But I also go into the book about, because you're talking about specifics, how to write an actual user persona. And I like to really, if at all, focus more on a couple of areas: user needs, locations. But I go into the exact, if you get a copy of my book, I go into the exact way to craft a persona profile. But there's also another point of view, by the way, from Jobs to Be Done, that says you really shouldn't focus on all of these demographics, because they don't always correlate to buyer purchase behavior and data one-to-one. Instead, you should just look at the user needs and the jobs. So it really depends on which direction you want to go in. But because traditional user stories are written in such a way that there are personas, you'll want to follow the way that we craft user persona in my profile in my book. But let me give you something that is very important. All of these persona profiles should be written based on research. That's sort of the problem that a lot of these personas run into. They're not based off of research. And if they're not, then you're sort of creating a bias that's made up in your own head. That will be very dangerous.
Absolutely, especially because it closes you off to feedback.
Yeah.
So in the book, you also include some expert interviews, and that I thought was quite a new and refreshing way to bring different perspectives to the book. Why did you decide to include those interviews, and what are some of the key insights you think readers will find in that part of the book?
I actually wanted to interview them for my whole book, but I realized that that might be a little bit difficult to do. Maybe in my next book I'll do that. I wanted to dedicate a chapter just to the expert interviews, because they're all my friends, technically, everyone I interviewed, and they have really influenced and shaped my thinking and way of working and being. I think some of the insights that the readers might derive from reading this particular chapter, agile and user stories are not the all and be all. It's really about working collaboratively, delivering really good user value and customer satisfaction and client value. and a product that makes a difference in the world. That's what matters most. And the world is always going to continue to evolve and adapt. And if user stories are not the end all be all, maybe it will be job stories, maybe it will be something else. But at the end of the day, it's really just a conversation for us to get started so that we can collaborate better and build products that make the world a better place.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that last part is quite important, right? Like, we are here to deliver products that should have an impact, and let's not forget about that part. So, Chris, we're getting close to the end, and of course, thank you very much for sharing all of these insights with the audience. The link to the book is in the show notes, and you can get it right now in your bookshop of choice. But if people want to find out more about you and the work that you are doing, where should they go?
They can either find me on LinkedIn. I'm Christopher Lee in San Jose. I may or may not be the only product coach that was formerly at Ernst & Young, or they can find my website, Product Coach Labs, or perhaps you can link them to my LinkedIn profile in the show notes as well.
And we'll put the link to your website also on the show notes, as well as to the LinkedIn page, so that you, all of you listeners, can connect directly with Christopher, and why not ask a few follow-up questions. Christopher, what's one last parting word of advice that you have for our friends?
User stories are, I don't think anyone claimed that user stories were ever easy. It's very much a team effort. It's evolving. It can't be one person. Try to do everything in small steps and try to do things one at a time. It's easier said than done. And also, if at all possible, try to look at job stories and jobs to be done to create a better version of the user story. And above all, try to break down those silos and work as cross-functionally as possible. That's I think the main takeaways that I would try to impart with everyone. But and also to enjoy the process, but it takes time and multiple iterations to get better and better. But that's for everyone. Everyone gets better after each iteration.
Absolutely. Well said. Christopher, thank you very much for being here and for your generosity with your time and your knowledge.
Thank you for generously hosting me. It's been a true pleasure.
We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.